We're going to look at something a bit different. Esau's warm welcome of Jacob. And in chapter 33 and verse 1, it says, "Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants, and he put the maidservants and the children in the front, and Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last." Esau was coming, and this was a stress for Jacob, and with him 400 men, even a bigger stress. Jacob heard that Esau was on his way with this large group of men, and now he sees this massive group coming towards him and his family, and he has to trust God's promise for protection. Now that this crisis had already come upon him, so he had to go, okay, I'm trusting you, God. He divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maidservants. These preparations were not necessarily an example of unbelief or reliance on human wisdom, yet the order of the group shows that Jacob openly favoured Rachel and her son Joseph. And Rachel, well, they put them last, closest to him. He put the maidservants and the children in front. Now, Leah and her children were more protected than the two maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, and their respective children. Jacob demonstrates his submission to Esau in this process. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. He crossed over before them. After being conquered by God, Jacob knew now, what he did now was he actually switched his position. He's now in front of the procession to meet Esau. This displays somewhat a change of character. He bowed himself to the ground, it says further on, and Jacob already had sent the gifts, remember? And by this he showed he didn't want to take anything material from Esau. Then by bowing down, he showed he was submitting to his brother and wanted no social power over him. If Jacob had not superstitiously tried to steal the blessing 20 years before, all this would have been unnecessary. Isaac's promise to Jacob, "Let people serve you and the nations bow down to you, be master over your brethren," it would have been fulfilled, I suppose, sooner. It is still common for believers to suffer some problems of trying to accomplish what they think is God's will, or in unbelief protect themselves with merely human energy and wisdom. I think we all do it at different times. God never needs his people to sin in effort to help him fulfill his plans. We've got to remember that. The ends don't justify the means, if you want to use a contemporary term. What we see in verses 4 to 7 is that Esau warmly greets Jacob and his family. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. Leah came near with her children and bowed down. Afterwards, Joseph and Rachel came near and they bowed down. Notice here that Esau ran to meet him. He wanted to see his brother. The sight of Esau running towards him probably terrified Jacob. Surely, he thought, life would soon end. Instead, God had worked in Esau. Just as God had worked in Jacob, he'd also worked in Esau. He only wanted to bring a blessing to Jacob. He fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Esau's weeping was because he met his twin brother again after more than 20 years of separation. Jacob's tears were probably from relief that his brother had not murdered him and his family in revenge, that's what Esau said that he'd do, and it doesn't come off that way. Apparently, Esau and Jacob did not feel the need to discuss or resolve the past. We don't have record of that in the scriptures. God worked in both of their hearts, and there is no need to discuss or argue over it again. What was in the past was in the past. The way that Esau greeted Jacob reminds us of the words of Jesus in the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. That's from Luke chapter 15 and verse 20. Who are these with you? In a moving scene, Jacob gets to introduce his family to his twin brother Esau. Esau receives the gifts. And now this is something in some ways we've forgotten happened in the last chapter. It says, then Esau said, what do you mean by all this company which I met? And he said, these are to find favour in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And Jacob said, no, please. If I have found favour in your sight, then receive my present from my hand. Inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I have seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So he urged him, and he took him. Hey, what a cool part of the story, isn't it? What do you mean by all this company I'm in? Jacob's, very generous gifts confused Esau. He did not expect this, showing that he had no sense of superiority over Jacob, and he did have a strong sense that Jacob didn't owe him anything. I have enough. Both of them says that. Both of them testify that they've been blessed. They could both say, I've got enough, don't need any more. Godliness is a contentment, and it is a great gain when we look at it. Esau's peace and contentment showed him to be a remarkably blessed man, though he did not receive the promise of the Abrahamic covenant as he had hoped. Although Esau didn't receive the great blessing, the covenant blessing that has gone to Jacob, who secured it by deception, yet Esau did receive a great blessing of a temporal kind, which Isaac pronounced upon him with all the fervour of his father, who loved his son most ardently. Esau thus received what he wanted most, for he cared very little for the spiritual blessing, not being a particularly spiritual man. And when he obtained the temporal blessing, he was satisfied. It's enough. So he urged him and he took it. It's one thing to say, I don't need it, but there's a real humility in saying, okay, if that's your gift, I'll take it. Esau's receiving of the gifts was important to the reconciliation process that Jacob was giving him. When Jacob gave such generous gifts, it was his way of saying, hey mate, I'm sorry. When Esau accepted the gift, it was his way of accepting Jacob and saying, hey mate, you're forgiven. In that culture, one never accepted a gift from an enemy, only from a friend. To accept a gift was to accept friendship. We'll leave it there for today. Bless you.